Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on, well, a pretty ambitious mission, aren't we?
We certainly are.
We're going to try and unpack a really complex stack of sources. They all explore, the multifaceted landscape of race, identity, and societal narratives right here in America.
Yeah, it's quite a stack. Our sources for this deep dive, they're pulled from various YouTube discussions, commentaries, that sort of thing.
Right.
So they offer a really raw, maybe unvarnished look at contemporary viewpoints on some deeply sensitive topics.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be navigating discussions ranging from perceived racial biases, cultural critiques, all the way to key political figures and, the powerful role media plays in shaping all this.
And our goal, as always, it isn't to tell you what to think. Not at all.
No.
Instead, it's really to lay out the arguments, the specific details from these sources. We want to help you understand the different perspectives at play and the particular evidence these sources use to shape their conversations. We'll explore what these sources are saying is happening, why they believe it matters, and frankly, what fascinating questions it raises for all of us.
Absolutely.
So let's kick things off. Let's dive right into how the very concept of racism is understood within these sources. Because they really present a spectrum of views, don't they?
They really do.
On whether what's often termed white racism is still a serious problem today, or maybe if it's more confined to a small minority.
Or even flipped,
exactly. If racism from other groups against white people is becoming more prevalent in their view.
Yeah, it's quite striking, actually, how these sources present a direct counter-narrative to, let's say, more mainstream views on them.
How so?
Well, for example, some specifically showcase tweets that they categorize as expressing, and this is their term, black hatred of white people.
Okay.
With phrases like, white people are so effing crazy, or never take cooking advice from white people, and even going as far as white people are the devil reincarnated. Pretty strong stuff.
Wow. Okay. And building on that, I know one source offers a pretty pointed critique. It's about language, right?
Yeah, the idea of black people telling white people they can't use certain words. Their argument, the source's argument, is that English was, quote, developed by white people. And therefore, telling a white person they can't use a word is effectively, and this is another quote, appropriating language and then telling us not to appropriate their appropriation.
That's quite a take on linguistic ownership. It's complex.
It is. And that leads us nicely into another area these sources frequently highlight what they perceive as significant double standards.
Okay, like what kind of double standards?
Well, they point to instances where, say, uniform racial representation in media is accepted if it's non-white. The example given is an all-black Super Bowl halftime show. Perfectly fine, widely accepted.
Right.
But, they argue, an all-white performance, that would immediately be perceived as racist.
I see.
So their overarching claim here, pretty bluntly, is that America is fine with racism if it's against white people.
And there's also this related claim we saw, repeated across sources, that white people are, quote, terrified of being called racist.
Yeah, that comes up a lot.
And one source suggests this fear directly influences things like news reporting.
Exactly. How perpetrators are identified. They argue that news outlets often use general terms like teen
instead of specific racial identifiers.
Right, specifically when referring to black individuals involved in incidents, like that Walgreens looting example they mentioned.
So it's presented as a kind of self-censorship driven by that fear.
That's the argument, yeah. And if we connect this to the broader political landscape, the sources suggest that the term racism itself, well, it's used as a tool.
A tool?
Explicitly, a tool for control, particularly within political discourse. They quote one public figure saying quite defiantly that the word racism is used to control black people.
Wow.
And asserting their own resistance to that kind of control.
So they're not just saying it's a fear, but it's being used as an active mechanism.
That's the claim.
And this view that accusations of white racism are often a form of virtue signal.
Which, just to clarify how they frame it, is like the public expression of moral opinions, mainly to signal your own good character or gain political advantage, rather than genuine conviction.
Right, that's how they define it. Or that it's simply a means for political purposes. That's explicitly stated in these sources too, isn't it?
Very explicitly, yeah. Particularly when they discuss the Erica Thomas.
Okay, so we've explored some of the broad racial dynamics these sources outline, but they also zoom right in on individuals, don't they?
They do.
Specifically looking at how concepts like identity and authenticity play out for public figures. This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Absolutely. The sources critically examine instances where individuals are perceived as, quote, pretending to be black.
Pretend?
That's the term they use, arguing quite strongly that non-whiteness is now a commodity.
A commodity, okay.
And Kamala Harris's background, for instance, is heavily scrutinized in this context.
Oh, so?
Well, there are claims that she is not culturally Black American. They emphasize her Indian mother, her Jamaican father,
Right.
and her upbringing, part of it, in Canada. They use this to question her identification.
And the deep dive into her background goes further, right? The Kwanzaa claim.
Oh, yeah. They really focus on that. They call it a total lie.
Why a lie?
Because, they explain, the holiday was invented after her birth. And they add, it was initially observed by people they describe as Black racists who hated white people, hated Christianity, and hated Christmas.
That's a very specific and strong critique of perceived inauthenticity.
Extremely specific. And what's also quite fascinating, and these sources spend a lot of time on it, is the discussion around her ancestry.
Her ancestry?
Yeah, noting her direct descent from a white Jamaican slave owner, a man named Hamilton Brown.
Okay.
And the sources then critique what they call the irrational nature of an ideology.
Which ideology?
An ideology, they say, that holds white people broadly responsible for ancestral sin, but simultaneously, they argue, defends Harris's own lineage from a slave owner. They see that as a clear contradiction, a double standard.
I see the point they're making there. Now, beyond individuals, the sources also launch into some pretty strong critiques of Black culture more broadly.
Yeah, they definitely go there. One source identifies issues like the strong Black woman attitude.
And what's their take on that?
They argue it stems from a lack of self-confidence or maybe an inferiority issue, and that, quote, anger only commands the pretense of respect. It's framed as a very internal critique.
An internal critique.
And this raises an important question, at least as presented by the sources.
Which is?
Why is speaking proper English sometimes seen negatively as acting white within certain segments of Black American culture?
Right, they illustrate that.
Starkly, yeah. With a Jamaican guest's personal story. Being ridiculed, basically, for being well-spoken by other Black individuals in the U.S., it highlights what they see as an internal conflict over language and identity.
And the sources, they explicitly state what they see as a problem with Black culture, don't they? Using specific examples.
They do. They cite incidents like the looting of that Walgreens by, I think the number was 60 Black teenagers.
Right.
And numerous instances of Black-on-Black violence. They argue these are cultural problems completely unrelated to white people and explicitly not due to historic inequity.
That's a significant claim they're emphasizing there.
Very significant. And following that thread, it's also noted that businesses might actively avoid opening in certain neighborhoods.
Why?
Due to conditions they describe as dangerous, filthy, violent, which in turn disproportionately impacts the Black community living there.
Okay.
And the sources then use specific examples like the murder of Tyler Wingate, described as a Berkeley leftist.
Right, in Detroit.
By Black men in Detroit, yes. And they point to the perceived limited national news coverage of that, outside of maybe Fox News.
And what's the point they're making with that example?
To further argue that these issues are symptomatic of underlying cultural problems rather than solely external factors. It reinforces their critique of how crime and responsibility are often framed or not framed in the media.
Okay, that's a lot to consider regarding the cultural critiques.
Yeah.
Now, let's maybe shift gears a bit. How did these sources address broader societal problems, particularly crime? And what about policy critiques or solutions?
Right.